On your website it says the entire purpose of Hempwood is to do something positive that benefits the world, its people, and their environment. Can you tell us how Hempwood does that?
The whole basis behind Hempwood is actually the Fibonacci sequence, which is nature's algorithm. And so if I'm good at math, I can try to apply that to help the environment because I love the outdoors. I love bow hunting, I love camping, I love hiking and biking and doing all those things. If we keep cutting down the trees and keep paving all of the fields, there'll be none of that left. I figured out a way to write an algorithm that turns a fast-growing plant fiber into a wood composite to stop cutting down so many year-old growth forests. So I originally wrote this in college to adapt bamboo into lumber and learned Chinese, moved to China, spent 14 years there and built 53 factories making bamboo lumber. We turned flooring, furniture, cabinetry, structural lumber, panels, all of those different things, and it worked. The problem was it was being done just as a means to make money, and so people were using the cheapest ingredients, paying people as little as possible, so it was only kind of halfway there. But it was a way that I could kind of sharpen my axe, essentially, to try to figure out what was the better way to go about it, the better way to do it, and actually gain the experience and put together some money to go and do it myself the way I really wanted to. And in seeing what happened with the bamboo, the problem was everybody got focused on money rather than focused on doing the right thing, and people were using dirty glues like formaldehyde, which caused serious respiratory conditions for me and all the other people working there. So with this one, we actually make a soy-based glue, because I literally have to go and get checked into a hospital and get my lungs worked on every couple of years. Since 2008, I've been hospitalized 3 times and had to get respiratory stuff taken care of, where I can't hike at high elevations anymore. I can't go bow hunting for elk like I used to because I wrecked my lungs with a petroleum-based glue, even though we were using bamboo, which was supposed to be a sustainable-based material. So in figuring out hemp, I'd done it in the nanotech labs, 2010, 2011. It worked. It was kind of a joke. We called it weedwood. And when it became legal in 2014 in the Farm Bill, people started asking me about this weedwood thing that I used to have a sample sitting on my desk at the bamboo factory. People said, hey, this weedwood thing could really be a thing now that the government's starting to loosen up on regulation on hemp. And I said, oh, cannabis? They're like, no, it's hemp. I didn't really know the difference. I just thought that it was a plant fiber that fit into an algorithm I wrote to make a wood composite. And being in flooring for the last 21 years, that's the natural outlet for what I make. So if I can take something I care about, sustainability, add in a healthier glue matrix instead of using formaldehyde because it wrecked my lungs, and then I can do it in the United States, it gave me a means of moving back home. The Fibonacci sequence is the most efficient use of space, golden ratio, 161%. That's the carbon sequestration ratio of plants to grow cellulose. So you pull 161% of carbon from the air in order to grow 1 unit of cellulose, 1 ton. So 1 ton of hemp stalks here actually has pulled 1.6 tons of carbon from the air to grow it. That's where the company name Fibonacci comes from. If you look at the little tree in O, that's a phi. That also happens to be my compression ratio for making all of the different bamboos, hempwoods, plantation eucalyptus, all the different things, because it works. That's your optimum use of space, which means your density of the wood depends on how much you compress it. Density is your hardness, your stability, and your fire resistance. So every single time I take a fast-growing plant fiber, I soak it into a glue, this time a plant-based glue with no VOCs, dry it out, and then compress it times the same ratio with that big press you saw earlier to make hemp. So it actually simplifies something that seems very complicated. Hemp just happened to be the thing that I thought had the pent-up demand of being illegal for 75 years. The idea is to have one here, have a Hempwood West in Oregon, have a Hempwood East in Pennsylvania, and then have Hempwood Central somewhere, either Montana or Colorado or Texas. And that way you can have your hemp grown locally, because everything has to come from within 100 miles. Mm-hmm. You can have it all made locally, so you can hire people from your local community here. And then you can sell it into your local markets where you're not kind of destroying that carbon footprint negativity that you have there by making it in Kentucky and sending it to Australia or whatever that is. So we do have our IP in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, the European Union, and we're still tinkering around with trying to get it passed in India and China. I don't have great aspirations for that, but we've applied for it there. We do have our second round of patents that got approved in 2021 for making structural hempwood. We do have our research funded by the USDA through the United Soybean Board for having a plant-based glue to make structural hempwood. And those tests are proving to be beneficial. They're working. We can make structural hempwood in a laboratory. We're now working with not only Murray State here, but also Oregon State. I've worked with out in Colorado for a long time. Washington State, UC Berkeley has the DOE labs out there we work with. A little bit, the Cornell folks are coming down next week. And we work with Virginia Tech. They have a really good wood sciences there, as well as NC State. Yeah, everyone's kind of huddling together and saying we need to make it. Now the market needs to catch up to all the cool shit we're doing around here. We have some projects that are going with some really crazy buildings. So we've been working with like JP Morgan with their new headquarters, trying to figure out how it goes in there. The Obama Library has spec'd it in for their new place up near Chicago. We have Willie Nelson has a guitar made out of hempwood that I think his son Lucas Nelson has commandeered. Stevie Wonder got a maricotti made out of it for Christmas 2 years ago. Chipotle has been a big supporter as far as getting our stuff into their stores. We have University of Kentucky has done a couple of projects with it, putting it into their sustainability office. We're the first ones to do it a year or two ago. And they go and test all these different crops and see what works and doesn't work, and then they cut it down and send it to us. We make flooring, and then they buy it back and put it in one of their buildings. That way their students can grow the hemp. We can make the hempwood here in Kentucky, and then their students are helping design the buildings and figure out how to implement it into what they're doing. And believe it or not, Bowling Green, Kentucky, Warren County Public Schools did the first net zero school in the world in 2010. And they found out about us over here, and they keep bringing parades of all their different board members through and CFOs through and architects and designers and everything. And now we've been specified for 4 public schools in the state of Kentucky. Each one of those doing a pretty big volume because they found out that students are having higher test scores when they don't have dirty VOCs off-gassing in their classroom. And the sad part is they're actually having to use windows that have significantly less ventilation because of safety concerns with guns. Where you don't have windows that open the whole way, they have windows that only open 6 inches in classrooms. And so it was a really big kind of deal for those guys. And we sent them some material and just said, hey, if you can't beat this stuff up, give us a call because we'd like to have a chance of putting it in your schools. And so they sat there and took it and did some Kentucky science on it, redneck science, where you're just like, try to hit it with a hammer, try to throw a brick at it, throw a cinder block at it, try to punch it, try to do whatever you can do, because high school kids are going to just beat it. And they're like, oh, this stuff came back as flame resistant, water resistant, and hard as heck. The only way that they could start to kind of sort of get it damaged is by hitting it with a cinder block. They're starting to catch on to all these carcinogens that are in your home, in your material. It only makes sense that if you're going to watch what's going into your body, where people are concerned about not having pesticides and herbicides, and people aren't drinking, aren't smoking, aren't doing all those things, it's only natural to start looking at what's actually in your home that you're breathing in. And having a product that's made out of hemp, which is a natural material, that's bonded together with soy proteins, means that people don't have the same lung conditions that I have. And so doing something for the environment where you can actually make a difference with what type of healthy material goes into their home and pay people, which it's not easy to pay people a living wage, but I'm proud to say that instead of making big profit, every single person who works at Hempwood, even from the lowest of the low, can afford to, my interns can afford to buy a house and can afford to buy their own car and have some self-respect and dignity. And then we're all even on the playing field of being co-workers instead of some sort of boss and servant scenario. And so doing those type of things, if you can live a normal life, is much more important than making a pile of money and buying a boat or whatever. Hempwood has 10% owned by our employees. And so the idea is that if you sit here and bust your hump and you grind it out with the rest of us, then at the end of it, you got a piece of something. You have a say in what happens with your own work conditions.
You mentioned a couple of certifications that you had to go through. Can you just say quickly what those were, what they mean?
Way too many. So for the production, we had to get OSHA certified for being manufacturers. We had to get EPA Clean Air and Clean Water certified. And then that led us into getting our LCA, which is our life cycle analysis, and our EPD, our environmental product declaration. Both of these prove that we are carbon negative from cradle to gate. And if you're using it within a certain distance of the mill, 500 miles of the mill here, and you're sweeping rather than vacuuming, then your entire 100-year lifespan of your Hempwood floor is carbon negative. So the only thing that can throw you out of being carbon negative when using Hempwood floor is your distance from the mill, hence us wanting to set up the other locations, and whether you choose to use electricity to vacuum for 100 years once a week, or sweep it. Where sweeping it doesn't use electricity, where you then calculate what is the grid load for your source of your electricity, whether it's coal, natural gas, hydro, wind, nuclear, any of those. That actually is taken into consideration how you clean your floor based on where you're located. Then we did our bio-preferred certification with the USDA. We did our ASTM fire resistance, no VOCs, which means no volatile organic compounds. We did our hardness, our stability, slip resistance, all the different things you have to do to legally be able to sell your flooring products or your lumber products. And the next stage is trying to figure out how to, when you saw Tommy moving around all that sawdust, that's a truckload of sawdust that's going to the Hemp Plastics Company. So they actually take our sawdust and use it as a biofiller with recycled plastic to make, right now they make packaging. They're trying to get into decking, which we'd be doing with them. And after that, we got our patents approved for making structural hempwood. Our trademarked name is OHB, Oriented Hemp Board. So you'll be able to make a thick hemp board, which will be 1.5 inches thick, about the thickest you can go with your heat transfer. Your thermal transfer from the top and bottom goes about 3/4 of an inch. So a hot pallet press, continual going through, cut it off at the length you want, typically 8 foot, 10 foot, 12 foot. And then you can rip it into 2x6s, or because hempwood is actually 20% stronger than your traditional woods, you could do, instead of 1.5 inches for your 2x6, you can do 1.25 inches in your thickness. Take that, make your beams here with your OHB panels in between it, fill it with some hemp wool insulation, and you've got SIPs where you can stand up the walls and make affordable housing. If you were building your own home, you would want to put hempwood in it because of the sustainability factor, because of the R value you get from actually having a wood floor in your house warms it up, not only in your mind, but actually on your feet.
Really?
You get an R value of 3 or 4 when you use engineered wood because of the different layers that are in there.
Oh,
so
wow.
if you're standing on concrete, your feet feel cold. When you're standing on wood, they don't. Also, not breathing in dirty chemicals in your own house is a big deal. The number one purpose that residential customers buy hempwood is because it's a healthy material. The number one reason commercial people or commercial customers buy hempwood is because the sustainability factor.